Everybody, get your book open to page 83. You'll see in that page 83, at the top left, talk about the ministry plan that we've covered. The next paragraph, now read these, and they're here for you to reread and so forth as you need them. But it says when the congregation focuses on mission, they define the boundaries within which they will operate, core values, why the church exists, mission statement, what the church aims to accomplish, vision statement, specific practical steps it will take to achieve its mission, ministry plan. And again, there's less of that has to be fleshed out for them, and more of that needs to be set up for the next pastor. But look at the next paragraph. Next paragraph. Sometimes congregations hesitate to work on mission and vision, believing that it is the pastor's responsibility to cast the vision. That is true. Yes, he has a responsibility as pastor and leader, as Moses, transitioning the people from one place to the next. He's got to hear God and tell the people where he believes God wants him to be going, casting the vision. But unfortunately, this seldom works because the new pastor does not know the community or the people. In other words, he comes in and like, I wish I knew more about what's important to you. If you don't do this, he doesn't know. And consequently, this new pastor cannot bring the vision. They can only bring their own education, background, experience into the new community and to this new group of people. And they're just kind of walking in like, well, here I am, and this is who I am, and this is what's important to me, and this is my educational background, this is my experience background, but it's all about him. And this is where a lot of times churches lose their way, and pastors lose their way. There becomes a distance, a chasm between the pastor and the people, because he intentionally and very well-intentioned thinks this is what they want me to do. But what we're trying to say is this process is going to equip the pastor search team to find the right kind of pastor that matches this church. And the pastor search team doesn't have anything to work with unless they either come up with it themselves or they hear from the people in these teams who put this together and say, okay, this is best of our understanding, this is who we are. And this is not poured in concrete, so it doesn't take a spiritual jackhammer for the pastor to come in and rip everything up. This is him seeing an accurate picture of who these people are. And if he looks at that and says, that's not me, he needs to rethink whether he needs to be accepting this leadership role. Really needs to rethink that. It needs to be some matching going on. The one thing I hear more and more from pastors who have gotten into a situation that has not been pleasant, they continually say, this was not a good marriage. This was not a good pairing, partnership. It's not worked. These are good people, and I think I'm a pretty good guy, but together we're just not matching. And so the process of a transitional interim pastor is designed to help us to equip the pastor search team to do the best job they can, to help the church, first of all, understand who we are to the best of our ability, hand it over to the pastor search team. They've heard from the people, they know where we're going, and they can accurately portray a true picture of the church to candidates. Whereas so many churches, pastor search teams do not have a very clear picture. They have a good idea of who they are individually on that team, but they don't necessarily know the heart of the church as a whole. And if there are too many bullies on the team, pastor search team. They're going to totally ignore what anybody else thinks. Because after all, church put me on here because they like my opinion. And so I'm going to put my opinion out and let the next pastor know this is what we are. But this work is the work that the whole church gets engaged in at various levels and gets a good picture of what we're all about as a congregation. So,
do you think this impacts the tenure?
Pardon me?
Do you think this has a big impact on the tenure of a pastor in a church? How long he stays? Versus if he doesn't, they don't do this,
I think so.
it affects, they find out they're not a good fit after
Yeah.
the fact, and then they don't stay. Whereas this way, they have a better understanding of the people, and they may cause them to stay
Exactly.
longer.
That's the design. The design is to, and no design, no process is perfect. No process is infallible. But it's a process that whose design and intention is to try to find the right pastor for who we are, which can't be done if we don't even know who we are. We have a lot of ideas of who we are, but there's not unanimity. There's not definition. It's up here, but it's not on paper where a pastoral candidate can look at that and say, if this is who you are, I'm really not sure that I fit. Or at least I know who you are, but are you open to some adjustments? And pastor search committees are usually like, sure, this is not an infallible process, but this is a good picture of us. And, in terms of flexing out the mission or the vision and the ministry plan and making that work, yeah, it's, you've got to be our leader, pastor. We trust you for that. So, and it's been said over and over through the years, it's easy to come up with words that make up a mission statement. And a lot of churches have them. And if they don't have them, they've gone on the internet and borrowed them from another church who's already done their homework, but they like it. Those 3 words ring a bell. So let's use those 3 words or those 4 words. I've already, in the church that I'm going to next to serve, I've got a picture on my phone of a wall in their church that has their mission statement on it. I stopped as I was touring the building and took a picture of that because that's going to be valuable for me to say, okay, you got this on the wall in there. Is this yours or is this the former pastor's? Not against him. He's a great guy. He's a personal friend. He's trained interim to help some other churches do this process. But who owns this? Is it the verbiage that you are comfortable moving forward with? It may be. Hey, it may be just great, but you decide that. I'm not here to decide because I'm not your pastor, I'm your interim leader. And you just decide how clear and accurate this is for you. So we could talk about a lot of aspects of that, but the process is designed, as we say, to help the people express who they are and come to ownership. And I don't care if the next pastor is Charles Stanley, that still doesn't mean they own anything biblical. They still have to develop a passion for who they are in Christ and what God's called them to do. So, definition, we've talked about that, and we could keep talking all day, but major issues to consider. Determining whether or not the congregation's image of itself is realistic. And as I mentioned earlier, said yesterday, tell me about your church. Who are you? Oh, we're a friendly church. Yeah, I know. Everybody is. Never heard anybody say, well, we're not a friendly church. Every church says they're friendly, but they're not. They're just not. There's some that are, and there's some. And by the way, I tell teams that are working on this that I hear people say they're a friendly church, and actually they have some friendly people in the church. But that doesn't mean the church expresses openness and friendliness to new people. So it's not an insult, it's just to say, yeah, you got a lot of friendly people, that doesn't make your church friendly. What are you doing to make it friendly? You know, what kind of church? Determining what is your view of yourself. Developing a new vision for the congregation. That's a major issue. Seeing the interim period as an opportunity for renewal and growth. This is revival time, and I tell them that. This is not a time to sit back and twiddle our thumbs and wait for the next person to come in. This is a time to actively seek God. You know, waiting in the Bible is never pictured as twiddling your thumbs. It's always pictured as doing something as you patiently look to God for the proper timing and the proper conclusions. But it's always moving forward. And so we're seeking God, helping the church see themselves as an entity without a pastor, thus separating the church's identity from the former pastor's personality and style. And yes, the church does have the personality of the former pastor. It's just the way it happens. We let him be the pastor, and we let him do what he wants to do, and we're patient with that, although we may not agree with it. I wouldn't do it that way, but I'll let you do it, Brother Pastor. You know, that's kind of the way they are. And sometimes, honestly, us pastors just let our ego go in the wrong direction. We think, well, they're with me. You know, yeah, they're behind you, but it might be way behind you. You know? And they're keeping their distance. So major issues, look at those. Then, how do you engage the congregation? Again, with this team, this may be an extended period of time because you don't want to just hear from the 5 to 10 people that are in the room on this team. This is where congregational surveys start opening up. The Heritage team probably didn't need to survey the congregation on a lot about the past. Now they need to maybe interview various congregational members. We talked about that. And, you know, engage the congregation. Every team should engage the congregation, but this one is where some surveys are appropriate. What do our church members see as core values? This is a time to send out some surveys, whether you do that on hard paper or on an online survey or both or what. And you can't just do that by raising your hand on Sunday morning. How many of y'all believe Jesus is the only way? And that's a great core value. How many of y'all believe, you know, and there's always some people sitting there thinking, yeah, I wish I could just really tell him what I think. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just wish I could express my own words on that or add something to it. So you can't do that by just Sunday morning, you know, raising hands. You need written surveys, asking people about vision, about mission, about core values. And it could be all of those. Have a core values survey. I mean, all on one survey, core values. What do you see as the core values of this church? What do you see as the real mission of this church? Does the current mission statement adequately express your views or your understanding of First Baptist Church, whatever? And then, what do you think our church should look like in 10 years? Now, you're going to get some general stuff, but real honestly, some of the general stuff is quite visionary. And that's what you want. You want to hear from the people, and you also want the people to feel like they've been heard, that they've had a chance, and it's not just 5 to 10 people sitting in a room coming up with all this. So, find ways, methods of engaging. Survey members, neighborhood ministry needs, and we talk about those. Interview non-members for their perspective, people who've recently left. Why did you leave? Guys, let's admit it. There are people in our church who are active every Sunday that in the back of their mind, they're not sure how long they're going to be there. And you'll be surprised at some of them. They're not necessarily upset about something. Reality. All right? I'm talking with First Baptist Church, Charlotte, their search team, and one of the things they've done is they've done their homework. I told you they waited a long time before they even opened up the doors for any resumes because they wanted to do this homework. And one of the things they found was their numbers. During COVID, a lot of people were moving away. All right? So we started talking about why is that? And by the way, one of the things I appreciate too, that they did, they didn't just depend on me, they depended on other state convention staff to come in and help them walk through some of these processes, including Todd Unzicker, because Todd texted me one week and said, hey, I know you were just with First Baptist last week. I'm going in 2 weeks, and I'm going to just talk to them about mission. And he said, you know, and they told me what he said, that he told the group, you listen to Allan Blume about the transitional work. I'm not here to talk about all that. I'm here to talk about your mission. What is this church's mission? And that's what he focused on and led them in that. And they started looking at that and the analysis of it. But in the process of them pulling all this together, they realized a lot of people, a number of people, were no longer coming. But here was the reality. They said this. There were a number, well, First Baptist Church is downtown, and so most of their people driving in, all around Charlotte. Why? Whatever reasons, where they grew up, it's, you know, they got friends that invited them, their connections, but they drive in. And they said, we discovered that during COVID, there were not necessarily people who didn't like the church, but people who are young families, for example, young families, whose kids were going to school in this neighborhood, whose friends were in this neighborhood, and when they come to church, they didn't know these other kids. And they were driving by so many churches, and all along they've been thinking, we love First Baptist, but maybe we ought to go to church in our community where our kids know the kids and we know the people. And they saw COVID as an opportunity to just say, hey, let's pull the trigger on this decision, let's make it happen. And so a number, and it was not that they got together and talked about this, but a number of those started happening from all around. COVID precipitated decisions for a lot of people. They were not against the church, they were not bad people, they were just having to reevaluate how their spiritual life would move ahead best and how they could most impact their own neighborhoods. I believe every church has people in it right now, and maybe fewer after COVID, but people in it right now who have been thinking, is this really the best church for my family?
That's right.
And it's not that they don't like you as a pastor or they don't like the church, or that's not it. They're just realizing we have options today. Used to be your church was the option, only option for miles around. But that was the place to go. And our friends, our neighbors, and everybody's, now that's not the case. And they've been watching other preaching on TV or on, you know, Zoom or through YouTube and Facebook and everything else, and they're thinking, that's some good preaching. I'm going to look at that. And so our people are just starting to evaluate more and more what we're all about. That doesn't mean they're ungodly or they've lost their touch with God or whatever, but they're leaving us. And they are joining some other places, perhaps. Some, as you know, have not connected in other places. They've just kind of been feeling like, I don't like church anymore. And this is a good time to just bow out and say, well, I'm not going anywhere. I'll watch it on YouTube. You know, so we're in that time. And this is why congregations need to be asked, what do you think? Because you've got some of those people out there right now that are thinking through, do I really need to be here? And this is a good time for them to express what their concerns are and why they might want to reconsider. You know, even in Pittsburgh, when Well, let me tell you this. Part of this process is depending on tools that the state convention has that you really need. One of them is Mission Insight. How many of you know what Mission Insight is? It's about 4 or 5 people in the room. You got to have that. You need Mission Insight. It is free. It is an expensive piece of software that the state convention offers to you free. You can't beat that. This is one of the values of our partnership in North Carolina Baptist. I was very well aware of Mission Insight, and I called the convention office. You can call the office that I work for with Brian Upshaw's or some of the other offices and say, hey, or I think there's some, even on the website, it tells you how to get connected with Mission Insight. But
we've got it here too, Allan, so we can serve them in that way if they need something.
that's true. Thank you. I wasn't even thinking about that, but a number of associations have that tool ready for you. You just need to ask. But here's what Mission Insight is. It is a program that pulls together data from censuses and even other data that's out there, and that can tell you more than you want to know about your neighbors around you. This is a good time for the church to look at its mission, but in light of its neighbors. And somebody needs to pull Mission Insight. Here's an example. This is what I was going to start to tell you a minute ago. I had the chairman of this team, and I said to him in a personal call, I said, Scott, we need to pull together data about what the neighborhood looks like and the surrounding county. That'll help your team understand the mission and the purpose. Scott, who in this church loves statistics? Man or woman, doesn't matter. Who do you know? And he said, I got the man. Then he said, let me ask our whole team. We got our next Zoom meeting. He asked the team, who do y'all think in the church loves statistics? Every one of them right out of the gate named the same guy. I said, okay, who is he and what does he do? He's a professional statistician. He does statistics for corporations all over the triangle, doing, pulling data together and helping them come to conclusions. I said, that's our man. And got on the phone with him, got on the phone with a representative of the convention who walked us through, said, okay, here's your password, here's your get connected, and they gave us an overview of how this works. And our man was just drooling. You could tell his computer was just about soaked with him just, wow, this is good. Yeah, that's it. That's good. He was just going to town on it. And anybody else, they would have looked at that and said, good grief, what do I need with all this stuff? This is just dead numbers. I don't need, but he was pulling it together because he could see the value. And so we said, okay, what do y'all want him to pull together? Do we want a radius of 1 or 2 miles from the church or 3 miles? Here was the answer. Oh, well, all of our people live like 4 and 5 miles from the church. We don't need that data about what's going on around the church. I'm sorry, I didn't know that was set to ring. Let me turn it off here. Okay, kill that one. So they said, we don't need the data around the church. And I said, oh, really? Why? Well, we all live, Yeah, but what about the mission field in the neighborhood? So they hadn't been thinking mission in the way I think of mission. So this process is prompting them, triggering new thoughts in their mind about, oh, well, maybe we need to be concerned about 1 mile, 2 miles around us because the church is downtown. And there's all kinds of people there, but nobody within about 2 miles goes to that church. Nobody. So what's our mission? All right, that's the kind of conversations we need to have. And Mission Insight and by the way, let me come to you in just a second, but Mission Insight will tell you about the people in your neighborhood, what their education level is, what their annual salary is, what TV stations they watch, who they voted for, what kind of political affiliations they have, what their social values are. I mean, it's like, whoa, they know more about us than we thought. It's in there. You can find out. You've got more data than you can chew on for the next year. But a good person in your church who knows how to pull it down can take this choking data and pull it into just a half a page of basic information that says, these are our lost neighbors. This is who lives around us that doesn't believe what we believe. Do we care about them? How does this impact our mission statement? How do our core values be influential in helping them to develop similar core values? So you're prompting conversations with this mission group that they need to have, and they've never been forced to do this before because they've depended on the pastor to think for them, and they've depended on the pastor to literally believe for them, to trust God for them, and do so many other things. And again, I'm not insulting the lay leaders of the church. I'm just saying, when the pastor says, can I do this? They usually are like, sure, go ahead. That doesn't mean they agree with you. That means they're like, yeah, I will let you run with that as far as you want, but we're not behind you. Or we're not helping you. They're indifferent on a lot of things. So now they're engaged. Now they're seeing what's important. And I believe they'll love and respect the next pastor far more than they ever have before when they've had a chance to buy in to what we're about as a church of Jesus Christ, as a body of Christ in this community. What's God called us to do? So
I was going to just give a testimonial. We're using Mission Insights. We're doing a vision team at First Baptist. We're actually not doing like a revitalization mission team. We're 5 years in, so we're doing from healthy to vibrant. That's kind of our next phase. And we didn't pull Mission Insight in, and we quizzed our people about who they thought their community was, and we told them who it was using that. And it, like for example, Brevard, everybody thinks retirement town. The number one age group that grew from 17, the top age group changed from 2017 to 65 and up to in 2021, it was 35 to 50.
wow.
And then the school age 0 to 17 became the second largest group. So there was a huge shift that no one had seen. And the number one religious group within a 5-mile radius of our church, everybody assumed was Baptist because there's a Baptist church on every corner. It's nuns. And guess what the second largest group is? Roman Catholic, 18.6%. Guess what the percentage of Baptists was? 2.4. And we found that out, and my whole committee looked and said, we don't think everything we're doing.
Yeah,
And I didn't have to say a word.
that's
And
right.
it even changed the position. We're getting ready to call another position in our church, and they're going for next gen. Like they're like, we gotta pull a younger person in here that's gonna be the next pastor, because we're gonna be behind the curve if we don't go to the next generation pastor. So it made my life a lot easier, because all the things I wanted them to do, I didn't have to talk them into it anymore.
Exactly. And that's why when they're engaged in pulling this data and information and having to search the scriptures and make all of this become a reality without a pastor, they've got you as their pastor. You're the interim. You're helping them. You're encouraging them. But they have eyes opened, and they start realizing, whoa, we're not in our neighborhood who we thought we were. And that's one of the things, these statistics will shock your people when they discover that, let's just say, 20 years ago, this community was 50% Baptist, and now it's 5%. And I mean, that is mind-blowing. Whoa, I had no idea. I knew it was, a little less, but whoa. And these kinds of pieces of information are available. And I want to say this to you, that this is where our partnership in the gospel with our association and the state convention is so valuable. These people and tools are available. You have at the state convention level and association level, people who have been trained, and some of them are fellow pastors, just like Branton is coming in this afternoon after lunch and talking to us. He's been trained in revitalization. You can walk into your church and sit down and talk about these things and help meet with some of these committees. There's nothing that says you can't pull these teams together with outside people coming in and sitting down. And do you know what the state convention charges for me to come in? $0. You know what they charge for Milton to come in when he was EDT? He came in if they wanted him to come and meet with him, preach for him. There's all kinds of resources available, and they can come and talk to you about mission and vision and fleshing this out and a lot of different things, revitalization options. Sandy Marks is available for that. Terry Long is available for that. On and on and on. In short, here was my philosophy. When I pastored at Mount Vernon and Boone, this is literally the way I did it. My last 8 years, roughly 8 years there, I know this as a fact, my last 8 years there, we had at least 12 different convention staff in our building, either teaching deacons or women, or leading a women's conference, or prayer events, or something. We had at least 12 convention staff in our building my last 8 years. And here's what I did. Every one of them I like to say. Today, we have Milton Hollifield here preaching for us. He's one of our staff. He's on the staff here at Mount Vernon because we contribute to the cooperative program and we pay for our convention staff. Ashley Allan is coming to lead our women's ministry next week. She's one of our staff. She doesn't have an office in this building. Her office is in Raleigh, Cary, but she's on our staff. And I like to tell people, these people are on our staff. Here's Perry Brindle. He's on our church staff. Hey, I know we think I'm the lone pastor. We only have one person on staff at our church. That's me. No. Our partnership in the gospel means everybody in Cary is on your staff. Everybody in this building is on your staff. We're the same team. And the thing is, we're just sometimes not open to picking up the phone and saying, hey, I need help. Because we don't like to admit we need help sometimes. But I'd like to have your input on this. And we had Eddie Thompson come and lead a marriage retreat for 2 days in our church. And I introduced him. He's on our staff. Hey, that's what these people need to be involved in as well when they're on teams. Call on the resources that you need. Look at who you are, but go beyond that. Okay, what are healthy signs? Focusing on the present and the future. Willingness to self-assess. We've talked about assessment. Congregation faces reality and affirms their true identity. Growing excitement about the congregation's envisioned future. These are all healthy signs. Asking process questions about what are we going to do next? How can we help? Those are good things. Spirit of inclusiveness and outreach. Rising level of trust. Humor. Patience with the pastoral search process. Now that's something you want. You want patience with the pastoral search process. So that's a good thing. There's some caution signs. The focus continues to be on the past. This is always the way we've done it. Resistance to developing new vision. Emphasis on blaming. We can't do this because so-and-so would be offended, or we know that brother so-and-so or sister so-and-so won't do this. Low trust level. Asking, well, who really are we? Who are we? Leaders and others continue to consult the previous pastor. That's not helpful. Maintain the same old programs, desire to rush through the interim, and then some things to keep in mind. Change is constantly taking place in the everyday lives of members. We're driving different cars. We're using different implements and instruments in the kitchen. You know, we're just doing a lot of things different. I used to have a dumb phone, now I got a smartphone. And, you know, not sure how smart it is sometimes, but there are so many things that are changing every day. Now, I know, and I tell people, I know that you live in a world of phenomenal change. Everything's changing every day. And many of you like coming to church because you're thinking this is the one point of stability that you have in life. This is the one place that's not a lot of shifting and changing. And yet that can be a detriment to us if we're totally out of touch and we still have hitching posts for horses and not paved driveways for cars. You know, it would be ridiculous for us to just tell people the only way you can get to this church is ride a horse, because nobody rides a horse anymore. It just, you know, I told you about the bathrooms that might be unbiblical in some people's minds. I told you that story yesterday. Are we going to say, no, our church is not going to have bathrooms in the church because bathrooms are not biblical? That's ridiculous. You know, there's some things that need to change, and the bathrooms have changed from an outhouse way out to moving inside, and that is not a bad thing. What else needs to change, though? We're not going to change our convictions. We're still going to preach the Bible, but you know, change is going on. But we need to decide what needs to shift right now. The transition team should use multiple methods of involving the congregation. That goes without saying. It's just very, very important. Let the transition team do the work. And again, the transition team, we're talking about this particular team, but all of the teams. Okay, so we give you, as usual, some biblical references, just a few about mission, and you probably have some more that you can add to that. That's great. This is just a few and some thoughts about that. Now, we give you on page 87 some mission questions for a small group discussion. This could be within the mission team, or if you want to toss some of these out to a broader part of the congregation, you can do that. External questions. Assume the church is a piece of real estate. What words would you use to describe in order to sell it? The church as a body of Christ is just a piece. If you just assume it's just a piece of real estate, you're going to try to sell it. How would you sell the body of Christ? Not as a building, but how would you communicate the way real estate people communicate? They say you have so many square feet, so many bedrooms, you have kitchen, you have garage, you have 1-car garage, 2-car garage, 3-car. Put words about your church in real estate terms. How would you sell it to the community? How would you describe the church to a newcomer? What words would you like to use in the future and describe this congregation to newcomers? What symbol would you use to describe the church? It asks questions about how do our neighbors view the church? What's our image of the church? There's a lot of questions that need to be asked. And you can read them. But then there's internal questions. If you were going to rename the church, what would it be? Oh no, our Transitional Interim is coming here to rename the church.
That'll get out.
Yeah, no, this is just, it's a theoretical idea. No prompting. And if you feel like that's a dangerous question, don't bother with it. If there are no pastor, no deacons, or no leadership and no buildings, how would you describe us as a church? If you keep only one part of our identity, what would it be? What are our distinguishing marks? What's unique about us? What are we not? What are our values? There's a great list of questions. But these are some things that this team needs to be asking and answering. And it goes on to the next page. You can see why I'm not going to try to read all those to you. You can read that. But this is a resource you need. And you can copy these and give it to the team leader. And he can ask those questions each time the team meets. We put in here another resource for you that's really interesting, a community of hospitality checklist. You can see this covers about 3 pages, and it's very practical. You say you're a friendly church. What would your hospitality score be as a church? I mean, you say you're a friendly church because you have some friendly people, or, look at this, the church building on page 90, the church building. Church building is located as an inn along the traffic patterns. Do you have good traffic patterns? One of the things, and this is maybe a little far-fetched, but it's really, we need to start thinking about a lot of things. When we had an opportunity at Mount Vernon to expand and build a huge parking lot that we desperately needed, we had bought land, that was miraculous, so God provided all that. The designers, the architects came up with your traditional parking lot. And I went with them and the building committee, and I said, I want to challenge y'all on your parking lot, because your parking lot is totally designed for cars, not for the people who drive them. And the cars are not the main purpose of the parking lot. The parking lot just simply provides a place to put the cars, but the people inside them are of the highest value. So, are you going to design a parking lot that is dangerous for people, or a parking lot that gives people access to the facilities? We re-thumped that, and they put, where cars were heading into each other, put a sidewalk to get to the building on every road. We want to get the kids out of the parking lot, the parents out of the parking lot, put them on the sidewalk, and get them safely into the building. There's a lot of times we don't think about things, but we design parking lots for vehicles, not for the people. We're not a church of vehicles. We're a church of people. And so our highest priority is people who drive those vehicles, not the vehicles. Let's take care of the vehicles, accommodate that, but prioritize people getting safely in the building. And when you have a parking lot that goes from here to about 2 blocks down, you don't want people to feel like the only way to get to the building is to walk in the middle of where everybody's driving, especially when you've got change of service, you have multiple services, and people are coming and going at the same time. Think about some of these things. Think about them. What are we doing for the people? And how can we do a better job of that? We had a lot of visitors that highly complimented us on that. They noticed. It was sure easy to get to your building once we got out of our car and get on the sidewalk. We didn't, if we needed to, we could have done trams. Some larger churches have done that. But, what are the way we're doing it with our building? Can people find your bathrooms? It was interesting at Pittsburgh, one of my biggest concerns, or concerns is another way for saying gripe, one of my biggest concerns about what they had was their bathrooms were so inadequate. But they felt like, well, that meets our needs, but they didn't even think about that. And outsiders coming in, it was ridiculous what a guest had to do to find the bathroom and then to get to it, and then to find that it was just all single holders everywhere, and it was crazy. And I said, "You need to do something about this." They said, yeah, we need to do. It's interesting, after the new pastor came, and I didn't complain about it all, but I'd said a few things along the way to the right people. Well, after the new pastor came, my first visit there, which was several months later, they had totally knocked out Sunday school classrooms and expanded the bathrooms closest to the sanctuary and made it more hospitable for guests. But people don't always think about that. It really was awkward. It was awkward. And as a guest coming in the first time, I could see that, but a lot of them, this is the way we come and go. Go use the checklist to look at a lot of different ways you can evaluate announcements in the services, how you're welcoming people, the order of worship, everything all the way down the line. And Joe? Yeah.
Are these available like in PDF form
Well, you'll have the notebook if you order, if you tell me. I mean, this is in the notebook, so, yeah, you can have this checklist, and when you take a PDF, you can print one page. You know, it's 140 something pages in here, and you don't have to print it all, you can just print page 90 or whatever. So, yeah, you can print those from PDF and have those. One of the things that churches need to do too, and that we use regularly at Mount Vernon, was to pay somebody to come and be a silent guest, an investigator. How many of you have ever done anything like that? Anybody? It's pretty common now. There are people across the state that you give them an honorarium or give them gas and say, would you come to Boone and visit our church and don't tell anybody anything about who you are, but just, we want to give you a form to fill out when you finish. And it's everything. I mean, if you're really wanting to learn about your church, do that. We had silent guests. I had the associate pastor do that, so I didn't know. They commented on how easy it was to find a parking place, where they greeted, what could they find the bathrooms. Was the pastor's message communicating? What did you think about the music? Were the announcements okay, too long? What was the spirit of the people? I mean, we ask him questions. You really want to know? Get an outsider. And our associate pastor would give him an honorarium, like $200 or something, to drive from Winston-Salem to come and to fill this out. And we had other churches, like guys like you, that we knew, and we said, hey, you got anybody in your church to be willing to do this for us? An outsider can tell you a whole lot. You really, really can. So that's the mission, and I'm spending more time on that than I am the other, because that is the critical group. That team is going to do more work than any other, and they need to be encouraged, they need to be valued, they need to be assisted in every way possible. Can't say everything there is to say on this subject, but that's the heart of it. Okay? Let's talk about leadership now. Again, we give you some fun videos to help you think through this process.
I was on this date the other night, and we were at this restaurant.
All right, guys, you guys ready to get started?
Hang on a second.
Trip, you ready to get started, buddy?
Okay, hey, you guys, we're all here, we should start.
All right, thanks for coming, guys. I just wanted to take a few minutes and talk about some ideas for the marketing strategy this year. So if you got one, just throw it out there. I'd love to hear.
Yeah, how long is this meeting supposed to last? The schedule wasn't exactly clear.
Should be out of here in 30.
Is that
Approximate?
Hey guys, sorry I'm a couple minutes late, we got caught in traffic.
7 minutes, actually.
What's that?
Couple is 2.
So what we're doing is we're just coming up with some ideas for our new marketing strategy. Anyone?
I think we should implement Pinterest.
Ooh, that's a fun idea.
What about a publicity event in the park?
Interesting. But how are you going to plan around the weather? What if it rains?
So we'll party in the rain.
Okay, just want to emphasize there's no bad ideas here. We're just brainstorming. So.
Yeah, I'm just really thinking it'll be a huge waste of money to try to plan around the weather.
Yeah, okay, we get your concerns. Nancy, thank you.
Okay, anyone else have an idea? Ephraim?
I've always wanted to see rain fall down all at once in a big splash instead of small drops over time. I mean, think how it could impact the irrigation system.
Okay, Terry?
Well, I have an idea from my previous show that I had last year. Let me take that back a little bit. I have this wonderful idea, but it doesn't really make sense unless I just take it back a second and bring it forward together. It was like 3 weeks ago that I remember he said something that I couldn't understand.
Hold on a second, Terry, hold on. Thanks for pointing. Here's what we need to do, okay? Lauren, you got this? We do a video submission contest on YouTube.
Oh, that's been done.
It'll be on Facebook, it'll be on Pinterest, it'll be on
If we
Twitter.
do something with technology, we lose the senior demographic.
So,
You guys want to see an example?
should we be moving on to the next topic? I mean, it's already 1:15.
Quarter after, that's funny.
Who knows how to put this on the screen? there, because you're not gonna, I want you to see all the details. We have cable, does this cable work?
And it's power.
I don't know if on the there's an
This one.
HDMI.
That cord's not gonna be
in
long
the
enough.
back.
Is that remote go to the
2 or 3 like
TV?
HDMI 1.
Plenty of time, guys. No rush.
HDMI
Isn't working.
I got a big marker.
And
Sorry,
so
I can't.
with,
Wait,
there's
turn it
also,
off, Michael.
what we call it SVID.
Hello?
Okay, I've got it working.
Hit play. Okay, now imagine hundreds of those floating around the web. You actually want to watch it one more time?
No, please.
Trev, I think you're on something with this idea. I really like it. Carol, did you get that down?
Yeah.
Sorry, what is C-test sub YT proofs?
Well, I'm abbreviating to make room for all these great ideas. Contest, uploading it to YouTube, funniest, and you get a prize.
Wait, where are the other ideas?
And time.
Where are y'all going?
We still have 100% of the things to accomplish.
Okay. Ever been in a meeting like that?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so you might have some leadership problems with some meetings you're involved in. Let's talk about the leadership team. Every congregation must be conscious of developing new leadership. But they don't even know what their plan is for the present leadership. This team needs to be asking questions. How do we develop leaders? How do we select and elect leaders? It's like, okay, we need new deacons. Very few people say, well, what does the Bible say? Most people are going to say, well, you know, nobody wants it anymore. Or Brother Bill said no last time, Brother Bob said no last time, Brother Steve, he's probably not going to do it. You know, all this positive stuff. And so who are we going to get? Well, we need to be training more. Yeah, we do, but who are we going to get now? And so the training issue kind of flies by us here. We got to have a now answer, you know, so deacons and nominating committee. That's always the crazy one. Can't get anybody to do all these jobs we have now. Maybe it's a good time to evaluate a lot of our committees. Many teams, many of these leadership teams in this transitional time have ended up doing that very thing, evaluating how many committees we have, what are they doing, can some of them be combined, do we need all of these committees? It is interesting. But it's also interesting, some churches don't have committees. Let me tell you, last summer, I could not believe this. Last summer, I went to preach for a church that was without a pastor, and I was just going to help them out. Went to preach, and got to know the deacon chairman and some other some super sharp people. In fact, this is a rural church that averages several hundred on Sunday. They have several PhDs who are all farmers with PhDs, business owners, all kinds of people. And this guy, who's chairman of the deacons, says to me, now after you preach today, you're welcome to stay, but we're going to have a business meeting. If you want to just slip on out, that's fine. We're not offended, but just want you to know we're going to have a business meeting. I said, okay, what do y'all do? Is there something on the business meeting that, you know, would be of interest to me, or do I need to stay? Oh, no, we're just going to elect the budget committee. I said, okay, that's good. Is this a new? He said, well, we've never had one before. We're going to have our first budget committee in the history of the church. Oh, really? You got all these businessmen in the church, all these trained leaders, great folks, that in their businesses have to have a budget, and this church has never had one. Never had a budget committee. They have a budget, but not a budget committee. It was kind of like everybody just threw on the pile that our team, our committee needs this, and this staff needs this and this, and They had a personnel committee, and everybody just threw it on the pile and made the budget, but there was never a finance committee or a budget committee. And I've heard of churches over-committed, but I've never heard of them under-committed like that. It shows you every church is different. You never know what you're going to get into. Some churches are over-committed and they need to trim that leadership list down. But some places, they need some folks to step up. This is, as you see on the screen, reviewing the congregation's need and ways of organizing, developing new and effective leadership. Who's boss? Who's leading this bunch? And we need to be talking about what is the leadership style. Are the elders, the deacons, or the bullies in charge of the church? Is this a committee-led church? Is this a staff-led church? Is this a pastor-led church? What has been the leadership pattern of this church in the past? Let's put it on the table. Let's talk about it. What does the Bible say about leadership? You'll be surprised at how many people in the room in a church have read books on leadership, whether it's John Maxwell or somebody else. Books on leadership. And they know what leaders look like in the business world or in their office. They are part of an office team that has a business model that includes leadership standards. What are our leadership standards? Do we elect somebody because they simply are the nicest people in the church? But they're the hardest working people in the church. Or they'll do anything we ask them. What kind of leaders do we have? And I know in a small church environment, the smaller the church, the more challenging this particular group could be, but somebody's leading. And we need to decide who is it, who's leading, and who should be leading, and what's the next pastor's role in leadership. You're going to start developing what is going to be a pastor profile. Now that's not the biggest job, it's not the only job of this team. This team is supposed to analyze and assess the leadership patterns of the church currently, but we also need to talk about what needs to be the next step. What kind of leader do we need? What kind of pastor do we need? And we want him to lead in what areas? What kind of gifts do we want him to be? We want an administrative pastor, or we want a pastoral pastor. We want a pastor who can do this and can do that. Size of the church can matter. Staff in the church, whether they're part-time or volunteer or full-time, the size of the staff can matter. But in second paragraph in your, on page 94, says it is not unusual at this time in the church's life that longer-term leaders are burned out or ready for a break. That's one of the reasons why I mentioned to you yesterday that leaders need to be encouraged not to quit, not to get discouraged, not to say that that was a wasted week or a wasted day or a wasted event, because God can use that in a lot of ways that we don't often realize. He can use it. When I graduated from Southwestern Seminary in Fort Worth, Texas in 1975, they told my graduating class, when you retire at age 65, 1 in 25 of you will still be in ministry. To the graduating class in 1975, they said, 1 in 25, 4 in 100, 4 out of every 100 of you in this graduating class will still be in ministry at age 65. Some will die in a car accident, some will die in a heart attack. Some of you, your wife will leave you and you'll have, or you will leave your wife with immorality or adultery or something and you're disqualified. Some of you will get discouraged and just decide, I just can't do this, I won't do this. A lot of reasons, but 1 in 25. It can be discouraging in ministry, but it can be discouraging for church members who are not being fed spiritually, not being encouraged, not being led. They want to be fed, they want to be led, they want a shepherd to lead the sheep, and they want to be cared for, they want to be loved. So what kind of pastor do we need to lead us? Let's talk about that, and that's a part of the discussion, but also the discussion, as I said, is what kind of leadership models and principles are we using right now, church-wide? What does our leadership look like? So it's a self-assessment as well as a preparation for helping the pastor search team have something to begin with, to begin to look at what kind of pastor we feel like we need. Okay? The pastor search team will feel certainly freedom to finalize the pastoral profile. This is not the full pastoral profile, but it is a profile of what we believe the church needs. Now, here again, well, let me get to that in a second when I talk about engaging the congregation, but major issues to consider, being explicit about lay leadership shifts, what's happened with burnout and dropout, and why are people not wanting these jobs? Maybe we need to reduce the number of deacons. There are churches that have had 25 deacons for a long time and they can't fill 12 of them now. Or 15 deacons and they can only fill 10. Well, maybe it's time to look. There was a time when we went from 10 to 15. Maybe there's a time to go from 15 to 10. Let's talk about leadership issues. So what is this discussion really leading to? It's leading to change. You're not using the word change, but this is going to bring change. There are people who are going to be evaluating what needs to change in the way we do leadership. Considering future lay leadership needs, looking at professional staff needs, learning about healthy, realistic, open decision-making processes and structures. This could get to where you start talking about that long list that the nominating committee has to fill, and you really are saying maybe it's time for us to trim this down, but that may require articles, bylaws, constitutional changes. If you have all of that detailed in your articles and bylaws, this may start a process of reevaluating that. Is it this team's responsibility to do that? No. Is it this team's responsibility to initiate it? Yes. To at least precipitate it in some form. Ultimately, the church is going to have to make those decisions, but this is the beginning point of somebody at least getting on the table that we really need to evaluate all of these offices and positions that are in our articles and bylaws. Or maybe they're not in articles and bylaws, maybe they're in a church operations manual. And we say we have to have all of these positions filled. Let's look at revisiting that. And I know that it can be a nightmare and can be a long process when you start looking at changing articles and bylaws. You can change the scripture easier than you can change your articles and bylaws. Sadly, that's true. So I know it can be challenging. You do not, as an interim pastor, you do not want to delay this process by chasing articles and bylaws or get sidetracked as though that is the major issue. It is not. You didn't come there as an interim to change articles and bylaws. It's not your decision. It's not my decision. It is this leadership team saying, we need to revisit this. And if they decide that maybe we need to revisit this after the pastor comes, that's their decision. Don't let them do it just to delay it. If it needs to be done now, encourage them, address this so that your new pastor will not have to not only get tied up into it, but also not have to get blamed for it. If it needs to be done, if it is so obvious, I mean, it's kind of like the sun was shining in these blinds yesterday early on pretty strong. And would we just look at that and say, well, none of us in the room are qualified to close those blinds? Because there's something in the articles and bylaws of this organization here. But hey, do you mind? Let's just close the blinds. I mean, let's not get stuck up in who can close the blinds or should we close the blinds or whatever. If it's obvious, let's do it. There's some things that are obvious. So major issues and articles and bylaws could be a part of the issue of leadership. Now, various methods of engaging the congregation. Here's where a survey can go to the church regarding leadership. Ask the question in a survey, do you see this church as a pastor-led church, a deacon-led church, a committee-led church, or a congregational church, or something else? Who do you believe are the primary leaders? Who are the strongest voices in the church? Can you, if you feel open to naming it, or if it's just by position, what positions do you believe are the strongest voices in the church, or the influential voices in the church? Do you believe the church has too many committees or not enough committees? What kind of questions do you need to ask the church? Affirm, here's our methods of engaging, affirm the different styles and talents of the leaders, teach conflict management and resolution skills and processes. Here's a good time to say, conflict management might need to be a part of the transitional interim process. Harry, let me ask you a question. Who are the conflict management people in your association, whether it's you or a pastor, or you may have some other professionals that you've called on? Who can the churches call on locally?
I'm certified through the Conflict Resolution Network in the state. Brian Upshaw, I think, on the state level now, that Andy is no longer there. I think Brian is the focus man there, Brian Upshaw. And he would be the one that I would bounce questions off of.
Yeah. Here's a phone call I got last fall. Well, it was really late last summer. This is so-and-so, and I'm in such and such a church in such and such a town, and I was told you might could help us. Our pastor just left, and we do have a lot of problems and a lot of concerns. How can we get an interim pastor? I said, well, tell me a little bit about your church. Well, we're elder-led, and with this and with that. He starts talking. And I said, so what kind of a pastor, interim pastor, and what do you want an interim pastor to do? Well, he started talking, and it wasn't 10 minutes in the conversation. He talked himself into this. He said, you know what? Maybe I really don't need to ask you. Maybe I need to reach out to a conflict management specialist in our community that we know that teaches conflict management at a local community college. His name is so-and-so. Do you know him? I said, I think I've heard of him before, but I don't know him personally. And he said, well, do you know of any other conflict management resolution people? And I said, yeah, we have some in the state convention. He said, well, let me call this guy and see if he's available. I never heard another word from him. They didn't need me at that moment. They really needed to talk to a conflict management specialist. And I encouraged him, by the way, as a good associational leader, I said, not only call that conflict management guy, but do you know so-and-so, your associational leader? He said, yeah, I know. I said, get him in on this, and he can help you. He's been trained in our interim pastor process, and he knows how to get in touch with me. And you call me if you want, he can call me. But see how those work out. Never heard from me. And that's fine. But they didn't need me. They needed a conflict resolution guy. So a lot of different things. There can be seminars on decision making. And it goes back to what I put on the screen, every church is different. No two churches are the same. Does this church you're talking to here need to slow down this process and have a conflict resolution seminar, a decision-making seminar? Or another Baptist convention or associational leader coming in and talking to us about church structures and how we can best organize our church structures. This is a good time. Time and talent surveys, spiritual gifts inventory. So it could go in a lot of different directions, but healthy signs, open leadership and decision-making structures, interdependency, win-win decisions. Clear decisions are made, shared leadership, election and support of new leadership. People are asking the process questions of how do we make decisions and what kind of lay leaders do we need. Inclusiveness of both old and new leaders, conflicts and differences are dealt with openly and in a timely manner. All of this takes a certain amount of leadership skills. I mentioned to y'all also yesterday that Dr. John Ewart is extremely gifted in conflict management and training and helping churches, although he is so busy. Right now, he is working with several of our churches in the state, including, I know, one down in Newbern, that there was tension in the release of the pastor. In fact, I talked to him several times in the past few weeks about his release. He's now trained to do this, but John Ewart is helping them because the church really has had a long tenure of some bullying in the church leaders. I mean, it's got maybe not generals, but top military officials. And what do they used to do?
Give orders.
Yeah, do this, do this. Here's what you need to do. And when you go to them and say, you need to do this, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. I outrank you. Like, seriously, who outranks anybody in the body of Christ? I have a good
They
friend.
have a lot too with the Marine bases,
Yeah.
Marine Corps bases there, as well as over in Jackson.
Yeah, so, and so that's what's going on there, and they need John Ewart in there. Because these are the kinds of tensions and conflicts of people that just don't realize that this is not a Marine base. This is not an Air Force base. This is the body of Christ. And we're all on the same ground here. I have a very good friend who served on the White House press corps a number of years ago. To tell you the date of it, he flew frequently with President Kennedy on Air Force One. And he's a Baptist pastor. He's one of our pastors here in the state, and long-term friend of mine. He was up in Maryland. I preached often for him, and our church partnered and helped them. But he was telling me one time there was a situation in the church. As the pastor, we were trying to address something, and the deacon chairman, and he had a little bit of disagreement, and in a public deacon meeting, the deacon looked at the pastor and said, "Pastor, I outrank you." Yeah. And so that's a reality. It happens. And there's a need for some resolution here and some pulling this in to talk about what this is really all about. It's not about a military ranking, but it happens. And there are people who aren't in military, but they outrank you because they've been there longer than we have. Right? Yeah. Same thing. Just doesn't have a military badge on it. Same thing. And so there needs to be maybe some conversations about leadership. Leadership is a pretty critical issue in many congregations, and it needs to be looked at. The caution signs are there where there's division, competition, counter-dependency, power plays. You ever heard of those?
Absolutely.
Where there are win-lose decisions. Some win, but most lose. Decisions are not clear, they're not carried out, or they fall apart. The pastor search committee becomes a power center. People who want on that committee. It wouldn't hurt for you to say from the pulpit, before it ever happens, that you need to be praying that God puts the right people on the pastor search committee. That it's people of God's choosing who represent this church well and not people who just want to be influential. It's always that. You know, I know you can get some people reactive to it, but you can lay the groundwork in a kind and skillful way well before that committee's ever looked at and searched and named. So talk about leadership. Then there's some things to keep in mind. If revision is needed in the document, governing documents, it should be worked on after the congregation has established the principles of decision making. So in other words, it might come up, but that doesn't mean you have to go jump on it right now. Will the church want to do this? Do they maybe need, if it's deacons or elders, need to start talking about how this works? The transition team should not spend its energy in the area of governing documents, for it potentially can drain the life out of this team. It will diffuse the energy, the revitalization spirit of this team if they have to get into governing documents and have to go down a long path. So keep that in mind. The team should use multiple methods of involving the congregation, and let the transition team do the work. I know that we as shepherds like to rescue people, but we're not here to rescue them. So if they need some help, encourage them and lead them, but don't try to do it for them. Then we, as always, give some biblical references and some thoughts about some of those relating to leadership. You have others that you would like to add to that, right? And then we have some leadership decision-making styles that are listed right here. You saw a couple of them on the video that we showed earlier. Here's some more. We won't go down all, but the autocratic person, the debating person, the delegating and the emotional and intuition person, the mystical. Oh my, I have served with some people in Baptist life as well as in the local church that I was on committees on, and I mean, it was jaw-dropping for me to look at them and see how mystical they were trying to be about things. It was almost like, you know, we don't really need to make any decisions here. We just need to pray, and the Holy Spirit will tell us what to do. And I can, but here's the next, yeah. But I can tell you that the Holy Spirit wants us to do A, B, C, D. Yeah. You know, this mystical, I've got all the answers. Let's seek God, but I've got the answers already. And so I've been praying, and God, literally, I have had people in meetings tell me, I have sought God on this, and God told me A, B, C, D. So I know how this is coming out. And I'm thinking, so why are we doing our work if you already know? Just tell us God's answer and it's done. But this mystical attitude of, you know, some people think that's being super spiritual, but sometimes it's just being pure mystical and self-focused. Let me let you look one more time at the screen.
Well, I think to be a good leader, you have to be responsible and try to lead the group well. Well, I think a leader has to have an open mind. Always has to be able to absorb new ideas.
I think we're a person who knows what he's doing. Or she.
If he or she says they'll do something, they'll do it. If someone thinks of want to build a clubhouse, right, and they think they can do it, try to help them. Encourage with imagination, because if someone says, I'm going to build a sandcastle, and you say, oh, that could be really big and wonderful, and that might be even as big as the whole beach, that would make them feel better, and that would make them know that they can do it.
And show the people the right ways, and lead them if they're new to the school or something.
I would probably choose a person who would not be mean.
I think they should take time off to at least listen to the people that they're leading over.
Well, it's sort of like
like an honor to be like a leader, because like sort of means that you're pretty important.
The hardest thing is having an open mind, being encouraging, and being a little bit strict. I think that's a very odd mixture.
I think a leader should be willing to let other people have a chance too, and not just saying, well, do it this way, do it that way.
There will be a certain person that if they're picked to be leader, I feel like, oh, not them again.
You don't want to say, hey, look, I mean, you're not doing a great job. You want to say something kind or something.
If you see somebody like really working hard, you should like compliment them.
If someone's not doing too well, it's not really too good if you just tell them that they're doing great and they're being perfect. You want to encourage them, but not lie to them.
Be respecting. Be truthful. Be patient.
If somebody makes a mistake and it's like, oh, all right, that's just one mistake. I mean, everybody makes mistakes. Just go on. You can do it.
If they have pretty good behavior, you could give them a racing style way or something like that. You need to keep it very good so that it'll be all very easy.
I think when people help other people, I think they get a little good feeling inside. And I don't know what that's called, but it's just something that lifts you.
Very good statement. Yeah, children can say it for us sometimes. They do. All right. So, questions about the leadership area? Any questions? Okay. We've got about 25 minutes to lunch. I'm going to jump on in and talk about the next one. If you need to be excused a minute, slip on out, join us, but we're going to go ahead and take this one because this is an easier one and shorter to respond to. So you need to step out. I just did myself to cover this. Now, when we talk about connections, here's something that you don't have exactly. You don't have this in your book, but this is an exercise. This is sort of a game, all right? Let me ask you, Clark, yeah. Clark, just as an example, answer those questions for everybody here real quickly, just kind of off the top of your head. When we say your home church, that's where you grew up, your original home church, and take it from there.
Well, where's the church you consider your home church? Well, the church I was saved at in Maranatha Baptist. Were they involved in missions? If so, how? Not so much. It was mainly singing and worship. They went out to sing in different churches. We were encouraged to serve outside the congregation, not so much there, but it was a discipleship focus. What was your home church's view of the Bible? Conservative but not legalistic. What literature did they use? Most of the teachers taught themselves, self-taught. How had they handled cultural and social changes? Don't know really how to answer that one. I think we were in a cultural place there that worked at the time, so there wasn't much change. Did they seek help in navigating their changes? Not so much.
Okay?
See, that's my church I was saved at.
Yeah.
When I was 17.
All right. Would somebody like to volunteer to do one more? Answer those, who'd like to volunteer? Just run down that list.
I'll do it.
All right?
Home church, Balfour.
Balfour?
Yeah.
In Asheboro?
No, right in Hendersonville.
Hendersonville. There's
Yeah.
one. Okay, I know.
Yeah, got run out.
Okay.
Were they involved in missions? Never knew. I never knew.
Okay.
Were you encouraged? Never.
To
What
serve.
was your home church's view? A lot of yelling. What literature did they use? Ain't got a clue. Did they handle culture and social changes? Yeah, they told you what to do, and if they didn't like it, they showed you the door. Did they seek help in navigating these changes? Yeah, they showed you the door. And that's a truthful statement. You asked.
All right. This, and that's good, that's fine. This is an exercise for this team. When you start talking about connections, and you could use this on any team, you could use this for the mission team for that matter. It's not locked into one, but when we start talking about connections, we're really talking about the local church and what happens between that church and somewhere else. And so these are questions that begin to initiate conversations about how the local church can be tied to something else. So I go in and I tell, when I'm training them, I'll say to them, you need to be talking in this group about the connections that you have as a church that ultimately define you. For example, do you do Operation Christmas Child shoeboxes? And most churches quickly, yeah, we do that. Okay? If you don't, that's fine. Do you work with disaster relief through North Carolina Baptist Men? Does your association have a disaster relief team? Or your local church have it? If it's just a local church, that's not really an outward connection. We want to know how you're connected to somewhere else, to some other organization that is a partner in ministry. Do you do anything with Baptist Children's Homes? For example, do you go and help them with a particular ministry, or maybe there's a regional children's homes that you do some ministry with? Is that a partner connection? Are you connected to the local association? How connected are you? Are you connected to the North Carolina Baptist State Convention? What's your relationship there? Are you related to the Southern Baptist Convention? And how healthy is that relationship? Are you part of Bible distribution, like through Gideon's, American Bible Society? What other kinds of things do you do? What are your connections? Maybe your church, hopefully you're connected with maybe the North American Mission Board with some church plants. Yeah, we're partnering with a church to plant a church or a new mission church or whatever. And that's through state convention as well as North American Mission Board. Or we have people in our church who are serving overseas. What are your connections? You know, at Mount Vernon, we had a point to where we were supporting Campus Crusade missionaries in 4 countries. That was a connection. But we also had 35 people serving with IMB in different countries around the world. And we had, other connections like that. You might have some other types of connections. Do you support a local pregnancy center? What is that connection? See, you want to not only say the connection, but define it. Let's say, what is the local pregnancy center that most of you would be tied to in this region? What's the name of it?
Abiding Hope is in Madison, Abiding Hope.
Abiding Hope, is that the one?
There's Abiding Hope, and there's also Maps. So there's 2.
Okay, there's 2 in there. Okay. So you write down the name of this connection, but then define what your relationship is. All right, for example, we have volunteers in our church who go volunteer counseling, who go volunteer providing clothing for expectant mothers. We have it in the budget for X amount of dollars. Describe, not only label the connection, but describe it. If you say, we're doing Operation Christmas Child shoeboxes, okay, that's nice. What does that mean? Okay, we collect an average of X number of shoeboxes, plus our church has in the budget X number of dollars to help ship the shoeboxes around the world. What is the connection, and what is the nature of that connection? How does that connection look? As you can see, there's not a whole lot of personal introspection on, trying to define a mission of the church or the purpose of the church or values. You're just saying this is obvious to us. But it's interesting how this starts chasing rabbits that you have to reel in. Because here's what happens. I know in churches where I've served, this is what happens. Well, we have a parade we have a float in the Christmas parade every year. Is it okay? How is that a connection? Well, we are in the Christmas parade. I said, is the Christmas parade an organized nonprofit? No, it's just a community event. I said, okay, that's a good thing. I'm not condemning it. I'm not even putting it down anyway. But that's a ministry of the church. It's not an outward connection. Okay, so there are a lot of things in your budget that are ministries of the church. We have a daycare center. This is one of them. We have a daycare center. Okay, how is that a connection? Well, people all over the community bring their kids to our daycare, and many of those will end up joining our church. I said, well, that's a nice outreach. But the daycare is owned by the church, so you're connected to yourself, is what you're telling me. And that's not what we're trying to identify here. It's a good ministry. And it's okay to list as a ministry of the church, but it's not a connection. We're trying to define what this church is connected to outside of ourselves. Outside of ourselves. There are plenty of things we can talk about internally. You know, that we have all kinds of little ministries. We have an annual barbecue to raise money for children's homes. Well, that's wonderful. But is this a connection? Well, it only is the fact that it's children's home. But if you raise money for the local cancer society is not really a ministry. That's just something you do. So try to differentiate between what is a ministry you're doing as a church. It's fine ministry. But what are connections that are outside of you? Does that make sense, or you have questions about what that means? Here's the summary of it. Discovering all the relationships and networks. Networks is a good term. That a congregation builds beyond itself. Simply put, what are the alignments to other organizations? Those alignments are denominational, spiritual ministries, connections, organizations that you're connected to. And when we say networks, there are some churches that are part of other church networks. There's a Pillar Network and several others across the state, across the Southern Baptist Convention. What are these, and why are we saying this? Because we're serving the pastor search team. We're setting them up for success. The pastor search team needs to be able to say to a pastoral candidate, these are the ministries that we are a part of outside of ourselves. And if we end up, by the way, not coming up with much, what does that say about who we are? What does that say? Huh?
Stuck on ourselves.
We're kind of inwardly focused. We're not very focused on going beyond our building. And we may have people in our church who help out in various kinds of organizations and structures, but we're kind of a loner here. We're not really doing anything for disaster relief in North Carolina Baptist Men, or we're not connected to non-Baptist institutions like the Operation Christmas Child is not a Baptist. Gideons are not necessarily Baptist. There's a lot of great organizations, though, that are not Baptist we should still partner with in the gospel. Generally, our local pregnancy centers are not Baptist, but we're part of that. So what are we part of that is beyond ourselves? What alignments do we have? So this is pretty simple. I've given you some information there about that. Look at the major issues to consider. Clarifying the congregation's theological position. Now there's where we found in a situation at Pittsburgh that we had a partnership with a local Hispanic congregation. They were in our budget. We were giving them money. And in fact, of the 60 acres of land we have, and we gave this congregation some of our land to build a church on, And through the years, we've continued to give them money. But I asked them, okay, what is the church doing otherwise? What do you know is going on over there? Are we just sending them money? No, we haven't heard from the pastor in years, and and I started looking into it and started reaching out. The pastor didn't speak very good English, so I tried to speak to him, and he was having health issues. His sister was very sick, and she was the interpreter for him, and it went on and on and on. I ended up calling the convention, and Antonio, I asked him, could we talk? Are you familiar with this Spanish congregation? He said, yes, I'm very familiar. And he said they left Southern Baptist several years ago and connected with CBF because CBF offered them more money. And he went on down, and I said, okay, we've got something to talk about here. Here's a connection that was in the budget, but all of a sudden nobody was really connected anymore. It was a money thing. And it used to be, but it's time to talk about this. And so I turned it over to the deacons, and they turned it over to the deacons to ask questions about what do we need to do about this? Are there any theological issues? And yes, there were. There were some concerns about the pastor actually having gone very charismatic, and he was the only one who was right. He was sort of the apostle of the church. So you go whatever CBF influences and, actually kind of church Assemblies of God influences. Okay, this needs to be revisited. Before a new pastor comes, because a pastor is going to ask the same questions. Why are we supporting this church, and who are they? And nobody in this room seemed to be able to answer those questions. And it was one of those things that was put in the budget back when there was a great relationship, but there had been a falling away. Actually, it's kind of just a deterioration of the relationship over the years. It just deteriorated. And it was no longer there, but it was still on the books and still in the budget. So that's what you might come across. And I would like to say on a positive note that after Pastor Peter came behind me at Pittsburgh and began to build some vision and direction about who he is and what they were doing, and he saw there had been a previous relationship, they reached out, and turns out that pastor became disillusioned with a number of his theological connections, and he was actually wanting to get reestablished with North Carolina Baptist, with Southern Baptist, and with Pittsburgh, and it's just kind of been a little revival for them, and they're renewing their relationship. Although it was terminated while I was there by the deacons. They did that. So, a lot of things can get on the table in these discussions, and issues to consider, methods of engaging the congregation. Here again, ask the church members, what organizations are we, what organizations that we're connected to right now are of highest value to you? What organizations or ministries should we be connected to that we're not currently? Get some opinions out there. I'm going to show you in a minute some ways of evaluating denominational relationships too, but associational, how can we better be connected to the association and so forth. Ask the congregation what their values are on connections. Then there's some healthy signs, willingness to accept and help resources from the denomination, appreciation for the denomination's traditions and missions. And may I say, let me just be frank, this is the point where when the Center for Congregational Health was teaching this, there were a lot of accusations of them trying to encourage the churches to abandon North Carolina Baptist and Southern Baptist and go the way of Cooperative Baptist Fellowship. That was the bent, that was the leaning of the Center for Congregational Health at that time. When the Baptist State Convention bought this material, I want you to know it was legally purchased by the Baptist State Convention from the Center for Congregational Health. There was a friendly engagement there about concerns about some of these differences. And I will tell you that I told you earlier, there's some churches in this state that the word intentional interim is very offensive to them because they felt like some of the pastors were told to come in and change them and move them away from North Carolina Baptist toward Cooperative Baptist or those kind of things. Now, I'm just telling you, those kinds of things were happening. I'm not being accusatory, I'm just saying those were the realities of what was going on. And you see how you can take this connections thing and make it sort of a political football, denominational football or whatever. I could see let's say a strong leaning Calvinist guy, which I'm not anti-Calvinist, but a strong leaning Calvinist guy as an interim walking into a church and saying, I'm going to convince him to become more Calvinist leaning. That is not our job. We're not there to push people or to guide people in any way except Scripture, and to help them decide what their congregation's about biblically. We're there unapologetically to lift up Jesus, to depend on Scripture, to preach the Word, to encourage those people. Well, this is not a good place to say, okay, I've got this favorite ministry out there that I'd like the church to pick up on while I'm here. Now, for example, for me, I speak for Gideons a lot. I speak generally at about 10 Gideon events a year, and I was in Michigan this past weekend at their state convention as a speaker, and I do that a lot. And I've got invitations to their international convention. I love Gideons because my life was changed by Gideon ministry. But I do not discuss that unless somebody asks. I don't mind sharing my testimony, but I'm not there to promote getting Gideons in their budget. You see what I'm saying? I'm passionate about it, but that doesn't give me the right to try to push a ministry in there.
Do you encourage them to assess and evaluate their partnerships?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what the whole point is.
That's the whole thing of the connections. What are our connections and partnerships and relations? And this is the time before a pastor comes to look at the health of those, the value. Do we really value those? Or are we doing this because 10 years ago, Brother Bob got us on this? Where's Brother Bob? Well, he died 5 years ago, but we're still sort of trying to do it. But nobody's passionate about it. Brother Bob was when it started. And we're struggling to find leaders. Okay, there's the red flags. We're trying to find leaders for a man's vision who's no longer here. And nobody else has the vision for it. This is a good time to start talking about what is our relationship. This is a good time to invite your AMS to come sit in the room, and you want it up. I mean, you're saying, well, what is the association doing for us?
There you go.
All right, let's find out what is the association's mission. Let's find out what do they do. Let's invite Perry Brindley to come in, or Curry, or Dennis, or whoever's doing your area. Let's invite somebody from the state convention. Now, state convention leaders get invitations all the time from churches that are saved. And here's one of the things. Why, this is a true one, okay? I'm not trying to stir up trouble. This is just it. Why did the convention throw the WMU out? That's a legitimate question in some churches that have heard that's what happened. And it's absolutely nowhere near what happened. I was president of the board of directors of the Baptist State Convention when the WMU said, we want to pull out. And so I know the details of everything that happened. And it was not convention action. And so people need to sit down and hear from people. And I'm not against WMU. In fact, I am excited. They've moved back into the convention now. And they asked for a restoration of a relationship that needs to be talked about, needs to be on the table, and that's good. And the leader is a great lady, godly lady. I love and appreciate her. We've got a good relationship.
Very pro-Southern Baptist.
Huh?
Very pro-Southern Baptist.
Very. very
I went
much.
through language school with her.
Yeah.
South Africa, she's amazing.
She's really great, and I'm excited, I know Milton's excited, but, you know, there's these words out there that of denominational tensions that are not true. Here's another one. I got a call from a convention leader, a new one, he's new on board there, and he didn't know the history, he knows I'm involved in the history. He called me and said, Allan, I got a church asking, why did we kick the colleges out? I was president of the board of directors that met for 2 years with every college president and the chairman of the board. I was, during all of, I seem to have gotten thrown in the middle of a lot. But I was there and I saw what happened. It was initiated by the college presidents, not by the convention. They wanted to know, can we develop a relationship that the colleges put out? And we talked about all that. And a lot of people don't realize we were budgeting $6 million a year for the colleges in this state. And it's no longer in the state convention's budget. That gives us $6 million that we don't have to send to educational institutions that can be used in missional things otherwise. But there are questions. All right, find the answers. I mean, there are people in the state convention, there are people in your association. There are answers out there, and they're usually not anywhere close to the misunderstandings that a lot of people have, or what the rumors they've heard and things like that. Transitional interim ministry is not about us trying to railroad a perspective or to push. We are here to try to give the church a chance to get the truth, get honesty, integrity, openness, biblical values. I mean, that's what we need to be focused on. Not trying to drive any other trains or issues that are railroading things down the road. There's probably enough of that going on in the church anyway. So, let's just stop where we are. It's 12. I'll kind of wrap this up in a little bit because we've got a few other things to say about this, and then we'll pick this up. Probably, though, after Brandon. Brandon's going to join us in a little bit. And he's going to take you to chapter 9. And so we'll jump over there and talk about revitalization and how that fits into our conversation here.